So perhaps I've finally convinced you to come visit Japan. Japan's tourism industry would certainly love to take your money from you and even show you a good time in exchange. But before you go, there's some important things that you need to do, or at least consider. So here's 12 of those that we should go through today together. Trevor in Tokyo. Number 1. The first thing is quite simple. Even if you don't speak Japanese, which is most of the world, you should at least be able to understand and say some very, very basic things. Where things like yes and no, please and thank you. If you can't say this, you're going to have a really hard time when you try to talk to anybody. So at the very least, look at some of my other videos if you're curious about that. That one's not too surprising. But paired with that point number 1 is point number 2. What are you going to do if you don't speak Japanese? When you first arrive at the airport, you'll find people who are bilingual who are working at the airport. But one step outside of the airport, and you should assume that no one can speak any English at all. I wouldn't recommend taking a dictionary with you, but if you have a smartphone, you can use Google Translate, Microsoft Translate, any other type of translate app that you'd like that are pretty effective for this type of communication. Now, what happens if your phone doesn't have internet? Say that you're in a new country and it takes a bit for your plan to kick over. Well, now you need a second backup plan. For Google Translate, you can download the dictionary locally to your phone, so you don't have to have an internet connection, so I would recommend that if you have the option. But in the worst possible case, you need to have some sort of document that you can point to say, okay, I need this, or this, that's in some sort of either universal symbolism or in a bilingual Japanese-English translation. Along with preparing appropriately is task number 3. Check the weather beforehand. Now this is obvious, but also keep in mind that not just the temperature of where you're going, but also the amount of sun, the amount of humidity, the moisture, how much are you going to be walking. Currently it's summer in Japan, so it hits about 100 degrees Fahrenheit and 70% humidity. So if you're walking around in jeans for any extended period of time or spending any time outside, you're going to die. Unless, of course, you're Japanese and they just completely are immune to heat. But if you're any soft-bodied Westerner, like some of us are, you're going to need to pack appropriately. Bring sunscreen, bring water, bring comfortable shoes. Pack according to the weather. And consider that in Japan, you're going to be walking a lot. Now say that you're in Japan, what are you going to do for your money situation? Now there's 2 general types of ways you're going to be paying for things in Japan. One would be with a bank card, and the second would be in cash. If you're going to use a bank card, you obviously need to tell your bank that you're going abroad. If you have either a Visa or a MasterCard, you're probably fine with an international bank. But if you have like a Discover or American Express or one of the other less common ones, you might not be able to use that card directly in Japan. What happens if your bank cancels your card? What are you going to do? If you have 2 cards, that's better than 1 card. But the one thing that you can always use in Japan is cash. Now, the only place you're really going to be able to change your currency, be that dollars or something else, into yen in Japan is likely going to be at the airport. Good luck finding anywhere else. Now, the exchange stations only do cash-to-cash transfers. They don't take transfers off your credit card. Now, how much you're going to need is up to you. If you plan on buying something expensive, you might need more. But say if you're going to be here for 7 days, bringing 7 mon or 70,000 yen, which would be about $400, would be fine. Eating and consuming Japanese stuff and transiting actively. On top of what you plan to spend, I'd probably budget another 20% in case things go sideways. Other important things to consider when you're first coming to Japan are the import and export restrictions. So if you're coming to Japan and plan on bringing anything, say your suitcase, you need to make sure you don't bring certain things into Japan. Most of these are pretty standards, things like animals and plant products, so no nuts, beans, rice, fruit, vegetables, meat, hide, bone, that sort of like ivory, that sort of things. Raw animal products, raw agricultural products. They can harbor pathogens, which can damage the local agriculture, which is why it's being banned in most places, and other animal products can come from endangered species, which is an international violation. Now, I don't think you're probably going to have ivory sitting around in your suitcase by chance, but don't try to bring your jerky in, for instance, and don't try to bring your nuts. You can bring them on the plane, but you have to eat them all or throw them out before you get into Japan. You can read the whole list online if you want to. Other things would include, like, don't bring pirated media into Japan. Don't try to bring counterfeit luxury goods, those fake Louis Vuitton bags, for instance, into Japan. Unless you're really up to some sort of nefarious purposes, you're probably not going to have 90% of the things on the list. But there is one big exception which you need to adhere to when you're coming in Japan, and that is drugs. Now, there's a lot of more things that are banned in Japan than are allowed in the US. Obviously, illicit substances you cannot bring into Japan, and there's harsh penalties. So do not bring recreational drugs into Japan, period. But any sort of psychoactive compounds like mood stabilizing drugs or treatment for ADHD or other sorts of psychoactive pharmaceuticals, if you don't have to take them, your life will be a lot easier if you don't take them for your trip. But if it's one of those things that you have to have, then those sort of controlled substances, you need to apply for an exception in advance, at least a month in advance. You need an import form for those drugs. Sort of related is a class of quasi-drugs, which isn't really a thing in the US, but it is over in Japan, and it's any sort of medical grade device or like over-the-counter drug, which usually wouldn't be controlled, A, or B, wouldn't have access to in the West. So this could be things like aspirin, acetaminophen, Tums, but it could also be things like a CPAP machine or contacts or those sort of medical-ish devices. Check the import sheet, but basically it comes down to you can take a 2-month supply into Japan for personal use, but more than that, you have to apply for an import. I don't want to have to deal with any of that, so the less is more situation. Only take what you're going to need, what you really need, and if you need Tylenol or something, buy it at the airport before you get on the bus. The related option is coming back. So the US is less restrictive. You're still not going to be able to take any plant or animal products, so you can't take back any sushi, you can't take back any jerky, you can't take back any apples, grapes, that sort of thing. Processed food are okay to take back, and anything in a package is usually okay to take back, except if it's raw. The other thing you're going to want to watch out for is if you go shopping a lot, then the amount of things that you're trying to bring back into the US is more than $800 more than the things that you took out. You should technically have to declare that coming back into the US and pay a duty on that. So if you're going to be buying a lot of things, you should, A, if you really don't need to open it in Japan, don't open it in Japan. And B, keep the receipt for that. And ideally C, tally that back up in customs before you get back into the US, so you don't have to worry about that $800 limit, and if you get challenged, you can prove it. Practically speaking, TSA officers and customs officers are very busy, so unless you're really being like exorbitant with the stuff that you're bringing back, you're probably not going to have an issue. But if you have like an oversized suitcase full of things that you bought at Don Quixote and you're hauling it back to celebrate your trip, just be ready to say that, hey, officer, I only spent $790 on all this merchandise and not $800. Now, there is some talk that $800 per minimis exception for per person coming back might be changed, but as far as I can tell from the official sites, it's still in place. So you can spend up to $800. And that's not specific to Japan, that's just specific to the US. So your own country might be different. Now you also need to consider what happens and what you're going to do if things go sideways on your trip. No one plans for things to go badly, but you can plan to deal with things that can go badly. What are the things that you can do? Well, the first is to contact the embassy in Japan. Not necessarily directly, but through a program called STEP. You sign up for basically a list serve, and if there's any sort of important, pertinent information that you need to have, such as a tsunami warning is incoming, or there's political riots, or there's a missile incoming, or some sort of crazy act of God, you'll get a message on your phone, to your email, or to your device. You also need to deal with communication. So in the age of smartphone, you're probably going to have your smartphone with you, which you're going to be using as your translation, your banking, your navigation. But when you're making your plans and making your preparations, assume that you have no data. Also consider who your emergency contacts are going to be. If you're traveling by yourself or with another person, for instance, and you're just free-form visiting the country, you might not have a direct contact. You need to figure out your emergency contacts, and if you don't have one, at the very least, have the embassy's number, which has a 24-hour hotline for dealing with these kind of situations. So you're going to a foreign country, your existing systems of insurance and social security are basically going to be gone. If you get hurt abroad, your health insurance you have in the US or your home country is almost certainly not going to be useful in Japan. And while healthcare is relatively cheap in Japan because things are offered at cost, you're still doing that without insurance. So you can get help in Japan, but there isn't but hospitals aren't bound to necessarily treat you if you're hurt like they are in the US without payment. So you're going to have to usually pay up front for any treatment. You can get away from some of the worst of this by enrolling in traveler's insurance, which is often very cheap. And then the last one's more of just kind of a fun one. So when you arrive in Japan, you'll probably be in one of two different states. You'll either be really excited to be in Japan, roaring to hit the ground running and want to go out and do something immediately, or you'll be absolutely exhausted from the 12 hours that you spent on a plane and want nothing more than to sleep. Imagine this. You are scheduled to arrive in Japan at 5 p.m. 12 hours to arrive in Japan, and it's 12-hour time difference. So you get on a plane at 5 p.m. and you fly overnight and land in Japan at what would be 5 a.m. US time, but it's 5 p.m. Japan time. You're exhausted. That first night, are you going to go out when it's locally in Japan at 5 p.m., go out, get dinner, go see the sights, and go run around for 7 hours? Or are you going to want to get a quick bite to eat and go to bed and relax? Anyway, that's been all for this week. I hope that's been helpful. I'm Trevor in Tokyo. Hope to see you here real soon. If nothing else, I'll be seeing you next time.